Now on to searching for active threats on Linux-based systems, so malware and hackers, etc. More commonly, these types of threats on Linux systems are on Linux servers and not on desktops and workstations, but the principles are exactly the same, whether it's a workstation or a server. Looking for threats on a Linux machine is actually a surprisingly unknown skill. Natively on Linux, there are a number of tools that Linux sys administrators are very familiar with for looking at running processes and networking. You can see a list here from PS, Top, HTOP, all looking at processes, and then network type tools like netstat and lsoff and tcpdump, which we've already looked at, or the GUI version of that, which is Wireshark. So you can use all of these tools, and these will work and can be effective, but they are not the most effective way. A tool that I would like to introduce to you and recommend to you is Sysdig. Now, this is a tool for capturing system events, filtering those events, and also being able to apply scripts to the events that you've captured. It combines the functionality of strace, tcpdump, lsoff, and lua scripts, and more into a single tool. It's open source and free. It's a very powerful and lightweight tool. It's a little bit like Process Monitor for Windows. So you can monitor your CPU, memory, and disk resource usage, file, user, network, and application activity. You can see errors and faults, and it also works and supports very well with containers. So that's great for people on servers. If we go here to Get It Now, we can see here we've got Linux, Windows, and Mac OS X. Well, there are Mac and Windows versions, but as of recording, only the Linux version of Sysdig is capable of capturing events and doing live analysis. On Mac and Windows platforms, you'll be limited to working with the trace files that are generated by a Linux installation of Sysdig. That may not make full sense, but once we go through it, you'll understand more. But basically, this is for Linux in order to do the capturing. If you want to do the analysis afterwards, you can use Windows and macOS. So if we click on Linux, and essentially you want to follow the instructions here, they're pretty clear on how to download and install, but I'll just quickly install it now because I don't have it on this system. So first it'd be a good idea to do an update. apt-get -y install curl. I want to make sure I've got curl so I can download what I need to download. So curl's installed. Then we want to add the public key for the Sysdig developers onto the system. We've done that. Then we want to add Sysdig to our sources list so that we can install it with apt-get, which we have done. Then we need to do an apt-get update. Now we're installing the Linux headers. Which is done. Now we want to install Sysdig itself. This will install Sysdig and csysdig. Sysdig is the command line version. csysdig is the GUI. And there we are, that's installed successfully. And if I type in Sysdig, that is the command line tool. Let me just run that now. And you can see it is creating a lot of noise. So cancel that. So what that's doing there is it's hooking into various locations in the kernel, and it's showing back to the screen system events, which looks somewhat similar to strace. But obviously that's far too much information for us to do much with. So its power really comes with filtering. So let me show you some examples of filtering. Let me clear this first. So maybe we want to inspect a suspicious process, or we found a process that we want to examine more. So how would we do that? So sysdig proc, which is process.name, which is obviously its name, equals SSH. And currently there is no SSH running, so let me create a suspicious process. And there we are, we can see all of the events associated with that particular process. And we can see here, for example, that it was nathan@demo.stationx.net, and it was run from this directory. And we can see the local address the source port and the remote address and remote port, etc. So let's escape that. Clear. You can also run scripts within Sysdig. I'll run a script now to look for the top processors in terms of network bandwidth and usage, in case maybe you want to look for anything that is unusual. So that would be sysdig -c. The -c is to then specify the inbuilt script, and then we've got topprocs_net. And currently there is no activity, so let's just create a little bit of activity. And on a machine that had some sort of remote command and control, we would see activity popping up here, especially if they were creating a lot of traffic. Say it was being used for a denial of service, this would definitely pop up on there. Maybe you just want to look at the top processors by CPU, so we just put CPU on the end instead of net, and we can see the top processors. Again, of course, if there's something here that shouldn't be here, we need to investigate it. We can see here there's Tor. Maybe we aren't actually running Tor or don't think we are. One of the crucial differences with this tool is that it's possible to hide processors from appearing when you use tools such as PS or HTOP. The hacker can hide the fact that a process exists from those tools by a few methods, but one might be by interrupting the queries to /proc. Whereas with Sysdig, Sysdig does not suffer from this issue because it takes all of the information from the system calls. So you are more likely to see all of the information, all the processes, even if they have been attempted to be hidden. That's not 100% of a guarantee, of course, as nothing is, but you are just more likely to see them with Sysdig. Now we'll get a little bit more detailed now. Maybe we want to see what directories the user root has been accessing. You can do that with this command here. And there we go, we can see the root user has accessed the passwords directory. Sysdig FD. FD is file descriptor .name and contains home Nathan passwords. So here we're checking out to see whether there's any activity on the passwords folder or directory. And there we can see that someone has done a cat of the passwords.txt file as a very simple example, and you can see the data returned. Maybe we want to be a little bit more specific. Maybe we just want to look at the opened files within /passwords or any other directory. Sysdig evt.type equals open, so open events, and the file name contains home Nathan /passwords. And we can see here that Nano has been used to open the passwords file. So that's given you quite a few examples there. You can see this is very powerful, very granular, lots of possible commands and variables there to figure out and learn. There is a Sysdig user guide which is here, and there's lots of good documentation for Sysdig. So it may have seemed a little bit daunting there with all the various variables that I was selecting, but once you get to grips with it, it's not too bad at all. It's just like any other command line tool. Now let's capture to a file. This can be useful for finding malware or hackers because you can watch the system and watch what it does over a period of time. And also these captured files can be taken into Sysdig later as well, which is the GUI version. Sysdig -qw dumpfile.scap. This will start capturing the system events to that particular file. Cancel that. And then we can query that file now. We can use Sysdig or we can use the GUI. I'll show you the GUI in a second. So let's use the command line first. And that there would just query everything, but we can filter what we want to query. So any of the filters that we previously had on. So say for example, topprocs_CPU, we could have the results for that from that trace file. And for that period of time, for that capture, those are the top processors. And we could just look at the network events as well. And there we can see the ping that we ran. If we want to do a long-term capture, we can compress the capture as we're capturing it. Sysdig -s 4096 -z -w dumpfile.scap.gz, and that will capture as before, and then we can query that file as before in the same way. So that's Sysdig, a very comprehensive tool, lots of filters there. Definitely check out the user guide. But we're going to move on to CSysdig now, which is much better for using for finding malware and hackers because of its interactive nature.